First Nations leaders from northwestern Ontario are calling for the local police service in Thunder Bay to be disbanded. Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler says trust in the city's force is broken beyond repair over its handling of the recent deaths of 3 Indigenous people. The families of those who died want culturally aware, independent investigators to be brought in.
The Thunder Bay police need to do their jobs. They need to forget about the skin color of people. Because regardless of what, Corey meant the world to me and my family. For me, as a mom to Corey, I will never stop. I will try to keep fighting for my son. And I will. I will bring those people to justice that murdered my son. Police can't do it here in Thunder Bay. Well, we'll get somebody else to do it for us.
Thunder Bay Police Services Board has now responded to that call to disband the city force. In a statement, it says in part that it understands the process of building trust with Indigenous communities requires transparency, acknowledgement, and accountability. It adds the board uses information from community feedback to help strengthen policies and procedures to make sure we are meeting the needs of the communities we serve. Well, for more on the background of these cases, we are joined by John Thompson. He's a journalist and also worked on the Crave docuseries Thunder Bay, which looked into the deaths of Indigenous people in Thunder Bay, Ontario. John, thanks for being with us. These calls are asking Ontario to disband the Thunder Bay Police Services and start an outside investigation into these deaths. Walk me through what these calls mean for the families and the victims.
Well, it bears mentioning that it's not the first time that the leaders of Anishinaabe Nation have called for the Thunder Bay Police to be disbanded. You'll remember in 2018, the police service was deemed systemically racist. Its board failed to oversee it properly. And there were a number of investigations into the deaths of Indigenous people that were performed so poorly they needed to be reinvestigated. So that's the recent background that we've experienced on that story. When those announcements were made, when those reports were released, the Anishinaabe Nation that represents the chiefs of mostly fly-in communities in the far north of Ontario and their lawyer, Julian Faulkner, who is there today, said that if these recommendations are not all met in 3 years, then the Thunder Bay Police should be disbanded. We are now past the 5-year mark.
John,
and there are still new cases.
John, this really is, and to your point, there are new cases. This is about the community and wanting accountability and wanting justice. Take us through, how has this kind of racism in Thunder Bay developed over the years?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because systemic racism is, of course, very different from overt racism. And that's not to say that overt racism doesn't exist in the service. It has been found. But systemic racism is the failure of the policies that govern the police. If you took all the racists out, the system would still produce the same results. And that's what's been found in Thunder Bay over and over again. And so the failure for those systems to change and respond to those recommendations is really the reason that we're continuing to have this conversation.
Hey, John, take me through how what you just described, that systemic racism, has factored into these latest deaths. What can you tell us about them?
Well, Corey Bolesky is the lone outstanding unsolved homicide in the city in 2012. 2012 was a record year for homicides in Thunder Bay, which frequently is the highest per capita homicide city in Canada. Mackenzie Muniz was a trans youth from Niskandiga First Nation that is being treated as a sudden death, and there were concerns about how that was handled as a missing persons case. Jenna Ostenberg, it looks like it's allegedly a failure to respond. The SIU, which looks into these kinds of things in Ontario, is conducting an investigation into that case.
You know, we also saw, just before we started speaking with you, that emotional reaction from one of the family members. And amidst all these calls to disband the service, what has the response from police been?
The response from the board is that they have recently changed and moderated their missing persons policy. They are looking for updates regularly, so that means it is unlikely that it was entirely instituted when Mackenzie Muniz went missing. The police chief and the board are doing what they've been doing for some time. And they're saying two things simultaneously. First of all, this is a changed service, and we are new now and we are different. And on the other hand, they're saying that change takes time and that we need to be patient. And it's fair to say both of those things, although they do sound contradictory on the surface.
I hear what you're saying. Maybe one of those changes, John, was the OPP announced criminal charges this month against the former Thunder Bay police chief and another high-ranking member. How did that benefit the calls for change?
I'm not sure how it may have benefited it. I think it exposed what many people suspected, and again, these are just allegations at this point. These haven't been charged. These haven't been tried in court. But the culture inside the police station kind of came to light through the Crave documentary series Thunder Bay and other places, where the police themselves found themselves incapable of having management respond to their needs, to root out corruption, to respond to concerns they were facing in terms of overtime and PTSD and all those kinds of things. And I think that the arrest of Sylvie Hoth and the service's lawyer, Holly Walborn, has shifted the consciousness on the ground once again. Again, this saga has been going on for 30 years now.
John, we really appreciate your time, your insight, and your work on this. John Thompson.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. John Thompson is a journalist based in Thunder Bay.